At one time, men settled their differences with fists. If that didn't work, then guns were used. Well, over time, our legal system evolved to give people a more civilized way to take care of matters. Every now and then, though, those pesky guns got pulled out and used again, though not in the way we tell about on today's episode. Hello, folks. I'm Steve Gilley, along with Rod Mullins, and this is Stories, a History of Appalachia.
Okay, Steve, this has kind of got my attention now. Here we are, and we're saying, okay, they used to handle things with guns.
Mm-hmm.
Then the legal system came in, and then those pesky guns got pulled out and used again, although not in the way that we're going to tell it in this story. So I'm totally lost here. We need to just get things started and get things on their way with this story.
Well, let's just call this a combination of all those things I just mentioned.
Okay.
All right. Now, if any of you in North Carolina are familiar with the name Waightstill Avery, or Avery as in Avery County, well, it's an illustrious name over there, going all the way back to Appalachian frontier days. Now, the very first man to bear that name was a lawyer named as the first Attorney General in the state of North Carolina. He was also a veteran of the Revolutionary War, and prior to the war, negotiated a treaty with the Cherokee on the Long Island of the Holston that gave large tracts of land for settlement in Kentucky. And that treaty is known as the Avery Treaty. He also is the person for whom Avery County, North Carolina is named. Now, this Waightstill Avery was also a practicing lawyer on the frontier of western North Carolina, handling cases as far west as the settlers had gone. And in one of those cases, Rod, in Jonesboro, now in Tennessee, he became the first man to be challenged to a duel by another, much younger lawyer named Andrew Jackson.
Oh, yes, the very brash Andrew Jackson. We can say that, can't we?
Well, you see, Rod, Mr. Avery and Mr. Jackson were arguing a case in Jonesboro, and, well, Mr. Avery had the better of the future president. Jackson made every argument on behalf of his client that he could think of, no matter how far-fetched it might be. Eventually, Waightstill Avery, I guess, lost his patience, and he commented that perhaps Jackson should go back to law school to learn how to practice law. An insult that prompted young Jackson to rip a blank sheet out of his law book and write a challenge to a duel to opposing counsel. Now, the challenge was accepted, and that Saturday, the two men met on a hill just outside town to fight. And I'm not sure, Rod, but I think that hill might be the one where McDonald's happens to be located.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm, I think. I don't know that for a fact.
Okay.
Anyway, by that time, cooler heads prevailed. Both men intentionally missed the other and parted amicably. But that's not the story we're really telling here today. It's another Waightstill Avery. Now, that name was given to family members and still is to this day, Rod, with the current bearer of Waightstill Avery being a man in western North Carolina well known for growing Christmas trees.
Yes. Well, neither is the subject of today's podcast, though. Oh, that was just a great teaser there, Steve. Well, William Waightstill Avery was the grandson of the man who fought the duel with Andrew Jackson, Old Hickory. He was born at Swan Ponds, a plantation owned by his father, Isaac Avery, who was a planter, slaveholder, and cashier at the Morganton branch of the North Carolina State Bank. Avery attended the University of North Carolina, graduating with the highest honors in 1837. He then studied law under Judge William Gaston and was licensed to practice that profession in 1839. Like many lawyers in the South at that time, he entered politics as a Democrat and ran for the House of Commons unsuccessfully in 1840, then again in 1842. Now, that time he won, serving one term as representative from Burke County. He ran again in 1850, and he won again. Well, during his time in the House of Commons, he made a name for himself as a proponent of states' rights and to secede from the Union if the people believed secession was necessary for the protection of their rights and liberties. He was a states' rights Democrat as the South headed toward civil war.
Now, about 10 years before the war, though, Avery had a more personal conflict. On October 21st, 1851, he got into an argument with another man over a court case in Marion, North Carolina, that led weeks later to tragedy. Samuel Fleming, a merchant from Burnsville in Yancey County, happened to be in the courthouse in Burke County, as did his political rival, attorney William Waightstill Avery. Well, the two got into an argument over a case that Fleming was involved in, a contested probate of his deceased wife. Avery was the attorney representing the wife's father, Ephraim Greenlee, who was in a legal battle with Samuel Fleming over his daughter's estate. Soon the argument became so heated, Rod, that Fleming left the courthouse and returned with a cowhide whip with which he proceeded to beat Mr. Avery until Avery was too weak to fight back.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Went and got a cowhide whip?
Uh-huh.
Wow. That must have hurt. Well, 2 weeks later, the two men came face to face once again in a Morganton courtroom where Samuel Fleming began insulting William Avery. Fleming's case was called and he took care of it, then went to the court clerk who was sitting next to the judge, William Horn Battle. It was at that time Mr. Avery approached Mr. Fleming and shot him dead in front of the judge.
Wow.
Yeah. Avery surrendered himself to the bailiff and was placed in jail until his trial a few days later. Now, this wasn't put off a year or 2 years or anything else. A few days later, the jury found him, quote, not guilty by reason of emotional insanity, end quote, and he was released.
Well, in spite of the incident, William Waightstill Avery easily won re-election to the House of Commons in 1852, and he led the North Carolina delegation to the Democratic National Convention that nominated James Buchanan for president in 1856. That same year, he was elected to the North Carolina Senate and made Speaker. In 1858, he ran for Congress after the sitting Senator Thomas L. Clingman, for whom Clingman's Dome is named, was appointed to the Senate. He lost that race to Zebulon Vance.
Well, after North Carolina seceded on May 20th, 1861, William Avery was named to the Confederate Congress. He really wanted to be a senator, though, and when he failed to win the appointment, he resigned his seat, and he returned to Burke County to raise a regiment for the Confederate Army. He died in Morganton from wounds received when he and Colonel T.G. Walton led a company of Burke County militia against invading Tennessee Unionists. He's buried in the First Presbyterian Church Cemetery in Morganton, North Carolina.
And that is that's a tragedy all the way around, I guess. But the fact that you're an attorney and somebody attacks you does not give you a license to get a gun and come back into court and shoot him.
That's true. I mean, but
and I'm absolutely shocked that he didn't get more time than he did.
Well, yeah. And then, it's kind of, but I guess back in those days, it probably was a little bit of an acceptable practice, so to speak. And I'm saying that kind of tongue in cheek, so to speak, going back and getting a cowhide whip and then whipping someone with it. I mean, that really, I've heard of things like that back in those days. And, that was one of those things that was done, I don't know, maybe in place of a gun, because it showed a little bit more, I don't know, what's the word I'm trying to think of, Steve? It kind of embarrassed a person probably more in that kind of situation. So, but, yeah, you're right about this. I was surprised that they turned around and they said not guilty by the reason of emotional insanity. That's kind of a freaky, kind of a verdict for that time period.
Well, it's one of the first ones I can imagine. I think there was one a little bit before that in England, I believe, that would have been the first. We talked about this on another podcast I had. That would have been the first one that was used, not guilty by reason of insanity.
Wow.
Well, folks, that's the story of the lawyer with the famous name who shot and killed a man in the courtroom. Another bit of the history of this place we call home, Appalachia. Thanks for listening. You can subscribe to the audio version of the Stories podcast at Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Amazon Music, Radio Public, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, and many more. If you'd prefer to watch us, although, Rod, I have no idea why they'd want to do that, you should click that subscribe button right down below. And by the way, a like would also be very much appreciated.
Yeah, we have faces for radio, but
Yes.
still, I mean, we're just going to be honest about this. We try very hard. Okay. So
yes, we do.
please take that into consideration.
Well, till next we meet, y'all take care. So long, everybody.
So long.